and tonight he is going to help us learn more about fruit trees and how to plant them, prune them, keep insects away from them, and fertilize them and so forth. He's a longtime nurseryman and third generation farmer. So he is also the business owner of Backyard Fruit San Diego. So I am going to let Tyler fill us in a little more about himself and his mission. And then for tonight's program, what we'd like to do is Tyler will go ahead and get started and give us some information, but then we have a lot of people on tonight. So we would like questions put in the chat box, and I'll be watching, and then we can, pose those questions to Tyler. And so he can give us the answer in lots of information. Oops, I might have a thing on my screen there. Okay, so anyways, so where is Tyler? Oh, one more thing. If you want to make sure that you've put your screen view on speaker view, and that way Tyler will be in the center when he starts talking. And so that's the best, so we can see him very well that way. So anyway, Tyler, are you there?
Yep. Hello, everybody hear me okay?
Yes. Welcome.
All right. Cool. I appreciate you guys all having me and everybody showing up. Excited to learn about fruit trees. This is something that I've dedicated my life to. And like you were saying, I'm a third generation farmer. Grandpa back in the day, alfalfa, cotton, citrus, all kinds of stuff out in Arizona. Mother's side, Rosarian. Father worked at the farm his whole life until he decided to get out of there and become a firefighter. And I've been Mr. Trees ever since I was a little kid. Skinny tree, they used to call me, yell at me, always climbing trees, always planting trees, always growing stuff ever since I can remember. When I was a youngster, somewhere around 18, 19 years old, I got a job at Walter Anderson Nurseries down in Point Loma. And I just wanted a job doing whatever I could around the plants, trying to just get my foot in the door as a kid. And I ended up, becoming a fixture at that place, working there for, 15 plus years, something like that, 12 to 15 years. Right before my first son was born, I decided I was gonna strike out on my own and forge the fruit tree business that I had been apprenticing for and working towards. I've spent numerous years and hours looking under microscopes, learning about the soil food web, how to identify nematodes, protozoas, fungi, the world wide web of the soil. And over the last 20 years or so, I'm about 10,000 fruit trees into the earth planted. I've got them planted all over, from Chula Vista to Beverly Hills is the main bulk. And then there are other places in the Southwest, Nevada, Arizona, other places like that I've been branching out to as well. I teach at all different types of colleges, UCSD, and I they have a student run grant funded orchard on site called Rogers Community Garden. And all the students and things get together and they do their projects there. They grow food there. It's a really nice place that the campus was gracious enough to grant them several years back. And from the beginning, it was my job to decide where the trees were, what was going on, how to set them up so that we get long-term production throughout the years. Right now, I run a business called Backyard Fruit San Diego. I have 3 little boys. A ranch out in Bonsall, more than 100 fruit trees sitting in the ground of all different colors, shapes, and sizes. We sell fruit, we learn about fruit, I make trees, we do anything and everything that has to do with home orchard culture or food forest creation. I like to think of it as creating food forests. If it's not something that you can kind of use in some way for the benefit of yourself, whether it's food or nutrition, tools, timber, whatever, it's something that we're going to actually plant in succession with thoughtfulness, so that every month on the calendar here in San Diego, we can get away with almost anything, which is really nice. So every month on the calendar, you should be able to be pulling something off your land. So that's kind of what I do. I go around to commercial orchards, home orchards. I do diagnoses on one tree to thousands of trees. Try to make better decisions and help people kind of learn how to select trees, why plant something here, rather than there, all these different kind of, scenarios. Right now is the huge fruit tree time of the world. It's the dormant season. It is stone fruit season here in San Diego. About the last week of December, first week of January, all the bare root fruit trees start showing up to all the spots, all the nurseries, all the box stores. Everyone's getting excited and geared up to start planting these new, varieties. Over the last 5 years, a lot of really cool varieties have been kind of released to the public, like pluaries and nectaplums and various types of pluots and apriums and all different types of cool hybrid fruit, which is really, really neat. And it's kind of like everybody's excited right now. They're headed into the nursery. They got a place they want to put a couple of trees or add to a little collection. And one of the biggest things that I see all the time as I travel around to house, to place is most of the time we buy trees based on, the picture and what we think it's going to taste like, but we leave out when it's going to come ripe. So come July, you're in abundance. Everything comes ripe at the same time. You water and take care of all these trees for the entire season, and come June and July, you have the bulk of your crop, and the rest of the year you don't have a lot left to show for it. So the idea is to kind of select varieties that are ripening in a period of time that you don't have already occupied on your calendar. So if you have, say, a couple of peaches, like a May Pride peach or an Eva's Pride peach, an early season peach, something that kind of ripens somewhere around May or June. If you wanted to select another peach or another nectarine or another plum or what have you, you would look to another piece of fruit that ripened in July or August or September or October. You want to really stagger your succession as a home gardener, so that, like I said, you can be pulling something off the trees constantly. Right now on the farm, we just finished persimmons not too long ago. They just finished up. Right before that was the pomegranates. And right now we have the citrus. They're all coming in like crazy. This is citrus harvest season right now. And we're doing one or two things right now. Either A, we're harvesting citrus, or B, we're pruning and planting stone fruit trees. That's the time to do this. I missed the question that flew by there on there, if they want to throw it back up there. But right
yes.
now, yeah.
Well, there was just one question about the food concept behind a food forest.
Okay, yeah. So the concept is occupy your space, take your lawn, and find a way to plant things like a tree that occupies the middle to high ground, shrubs, berry shrubs, grapes, ground covers, vines, things that occupy walls and lower ground. Also, you can start doing like vegetable boxes and root crops and other types of things, so that everything kind of growing in that area is pickable, eatable, usable in some aspects. So what they found in a lot of the studies, like UC Riverside, UC Davis, things like that, is what we used to think was we plant trees, give them a lot of space, grow them as big as we can get them, and that they would give us the most profitability, the most bang for our buck, and all that. That's all of those things. But what turns out is, when they decided to start planting trees a lot closer together, so that they became, the branches of one tree kissed the branches of the other tree and shaded the ground underneath, they kept the trees smaller. And what they found was they used water more efficiently. They were more productive. There was less labor involved in picking, and machinery needed to gather the crops. And at that point, especially with avocados and citrus and things like that, that was a real turning point in how people were planting their orchards. So when we set up like a normal front lawn or a backyard or something like that, instead of planting the trees, 10, 20 feet apart. We're planting them 6 to 8 feet, trunk to trunk, closer together, so that those branches come and kiss each other and kind of shade the ground underneath, all those things. And then in all the blank spaces, you're implementing like cover crops, things that are bringing in, you know, the nitrogen fixing bacteria and really kind of turning over the soil. Heavy mulch chips, berries, you know, different types of shrubs and pollinating plants, rosemaries and lavenders, and high terpene rich plants for discouraging insects and encouraging pollinators, all these things. So getting kind of that diversity up on the land is really what I preach a lot of. We, like I said, we can kind of get away with anything we want here. It's one of the most diverse plant populations on planet Earth. Is this area right here? Yeah. There are more plants from all over the world than there is, you know, anywhere else. They all come here and love it. So there is a variety for most cultures, most people, that will fit in to the weather scheme and your overall outlook. But the idea is to plant more closer together, keep things more maintained, smaller, and you know.
Yeah. Tyler, we have another, we have a question about a 75-year-old orange tree that is no longer bearing oranges. Do they age out?
So typical lifespan of a city tree, like a regular old backyard tree, is somewhere between 35, 45 years. I have been to many, more than I can count, historical, citrus groves and things where they're well over 100 years old, 109, 110 years old, doing just fine. Age is kind of relative, just like, for all of us. It's care, it's long-term, it's environment, it's all these things come into play. But a lack of production on oranges can mean a variety of different things. And especially as of late, we have the new Asian citrus psyllid insect that's been here. And that is causing a ruckus like you'd never believe.
Is that the curly leaf thing?
No, that's the citrus leaf miner.
Oh,
and
okay.
Every summer, about June, the leaf miner on your citrus will show up and they'll attack your new growth, and your new growth specifically. So all the new growth that comes out will all be crinkly, and you'll have little squiggle marks, and they'll all just kind of look really sick and terrible. But that actually isn't that bad of a problem. That leaf is still functioning just fine, and it's not killing the tree or transmitting any types of diseases. But on that same shoot of damaged leaves from the leaf miner, on the stems and where the leaves are connecting, that is a hot spot for this Asian citrus psyllid. And if you go to Google and you type in ACP citrus, it'll pull up some cool pictures. It'll take you down this wild rabbit hole. But essentially, there was a bug that was in Asia. Somebody went to Asia, took a piece of citrus back to Florida, grafted that piece of citrus into their home orchard in Florida. That piece of wood was infected. It had the bacteria and the insect present. We don't have the predators and things like that here in the West that took care of this insect, and it started blowing out of proportion. And basically, this insect flies around and it lands on your citrus trees. And if it is carrying this bacteria, it's called Wanglongbing, or citrus greening disease is what it manifests to. But if it's carrying this bacteria, it just bites your leaf. And if it bites your leaf and it has the bacteria, your whole citrus tree is going to die. There's no way to prevent it. There's no way to stop it. There's no way to do anything. It's transmitting that bacteria directly to your tree. So over the past 10, 15 years, maybe 12 years, somewhere around that realm, it's been making its way from Florida all the way across the southern states. And it showed up in Hillcrest a few years back, and boom, a tree tested hot with the bacteria in Hillcrest, and all of the citrus trees in San Diego County went on quarantine. So if you buy a citrus tree in San Diego County, it cannot leave the county. You can't take it out of the county. It lives here, it dies here. You can't bring citrus from other places into San Diego County. You can't do any of these things. Citrus is now quarantined in San Diego County and has been for, a decade or so. And over that decade, I've spent a lot of time looking for this insect, trying to learn and find it and see if it actually is really happening and what's going on. And I hadn't seen it for the first 9 years, but this last year, it seems like some horrible bad nightmare, because every single place that I go, we find the insect. We find the babies, we find the adults. We've now started to. There's a whole protocol, and when you go to Google and you type in ACP citrus, you'll show you the protocols and stuff for what you're supposed to do if you find the insect, or how to dispose of the branches and the trimmings and all that stuff. It's very specific type information, but I hadn't seen it, wasn't really concerned about it as much for the last few years, but this last year it has been popping up everywhere, from Chula Vista to Beverly Hills and everywhere kind of in between. I've been finding the insect all over the place. And when you find it, you have the homeowners, they're supposed to call the county. It's a free thing. They come out, they take samples of your tree, they'll test the tree for the bacteria, and if it comes back with the bacteria, then the tree needs to be destroyed. It's then a vector. So it's been this last 2 months, kind of getting all the results back from weeks back, because they're 2 or 3 months back behind now with getting results back to people, because it's really blowing up the charts. So going back to the question, your fruit tree not producing and such, that is just one avenue of where it could just be sick along those lines, and probably should be, taking a look at just to make sure what's going on. It could be something as simple as not proper food or water, or, all those other things as well. Out of all the tests that we've done over the past couple months now, a couple of them have come back dirty, but most of them have no answer, which means they're coming back clean, which means there's more of the insects that aren't carrying the bacteria right now than there are that are actually picking up the bacteria. So if you have a sick citrus tree that's not doing well, looking very sickly, the fruit is mutilated or kind of funky shapen, or never really turns the proper color, the proper orange, or it kind of stays green, hence the citrus greening disease, then that's something that should, definitely be taken a look at closer by the county, by myself, by somebody else who's going to be able to identify the insect. Even yourself, if you go to, like I said, you go to Google, you look at some pictures, it's pretty easy to see. It's an extremely small bug, kind of the size of a whitefly, and it sits up on its face and puts its butt in the air with these little wings when it's sitting up on the branches. And it's very definitive when you see it, and you see the babies and stuff like that. They have a look. The babies are like a yellow orange. They look like an aphid kind of, and out of their little butts, they have this little white squiggly thing that comes out of their butts. And that little white squiggly thing that's going around, you'll see the pictures of them, is exactly, that's the signature. Boom. That's the signature of the offspring. So it's hard to say why a citrus tree wouldn't be producing without seeing it on hand, just like anybody, it's a doctor's visit and it needs to kind of be investigated. But that is something that's a really big deal, that's starting to really, really take us by storm. And a couple of the smartest people that I know are saying that, within, 5-10 years, most of the citrus, in backyards will be gone. They'll be dead.
Wow.
With the spread of this thing. And there's no cure, and there's not something that's on the horizon for that right at the moment. The county's been working on releasing wasps and things that will hunt them down and help kind of keeping them in check. And then they're asking people to, treat their trees more regularly. And there's, so if you look on the county website, or you talk to one of them, they'll recommend that you use the Bayer systemic poison stuff that you mix in water, and you pour it in the ground, and the tree drinks it up and absorbs it through the tree, and you'll have protection for 3 months or so. But honestly, I think that is a very poor way to take care of things, and that's hurting our water table. It's the next Roundup. Eventually, they're going to be taking that type of stuff away. There was a lot of arguments about how that particular type, those systemics don't penetrate the fruit walls of the fruit in development, which I don't know how that would even be possible. You know what I mean? When it's completely internal with the plant itself. So it's just one of those weird things that's probably doing more harm than good, you know, more so. So what I recommend is using like a sulfur spray or a spray called orchard spray, which is a sulfur and a pyrethrin mixture. And it's like sulfur by itself is an organic, certified, stable killer product. It does all kinds of things from fungus to bugs. Been used for 100+ years. You know what I mean? It works great on all kinds of things. Kind of a pain in the butt to use the powder, but it absolutely works on lots of things. And then if you really wanted to kind of step up the power and not have to do it as often, or you really had a problem that was an infestation, or you really needed to knock something down, the product, the orchard spray, has just that extra pyrethrin, which is, it's, you know, derived from marigolds. But once you start getting to that point, you don't get those certifications anymore. It's much safer to use, very efficient, you know, does all those things, because regardless if you pour the poison in the ground and your tree drinks it up, it's still not protected, because if the bug flies there and bites the leaf, it can still transmit it the disease. It doesn't do you any good. All that is doing is stopping it from being able to replicate and lay eggs and have those babies pick up the bacteria and fly off. So that's just keeping the bug from being able to leave the property. It's not protecting your tree. So if there's nothing that can actually protect your tree, then it's my opinion, if you can and you have the time, to get a little pump sprayer and get a thing of orchard spray for less than $20, and, you know, once or twice a month during the grow season, give your trees a good spray down. Make sure you're treating them a little bit more often. And really doesn't matter what you're using, just something that's going to actually kill them. You can use sulfurs, you can use various oils on things, but as you go lesser and lesser and more, you know, safe and organic, the less it is effective on that really tough bug. And we really need to kind of clamp down if we're gonna buy ourselves some time for a cure to show up. They found some resistance in the Australian finger lime, which is, I don't know if you guys know what the Australian finger lime is, but it's a distant relative, and it's very delicious and very cool looking citrus tree in its own right. But it actually has a little bit of the resistance in it to the psyllid. So UC Riverside and a couple places, they have a program called the CCPP, Citrus Clonal Protection Program. And basically it's the citrus, they're in these protective houses out there in Riverside, and it's their job to protect the citrus, the genome. And they have varieties from all around the world, and you can actually order these varieties certified clean for super cheap and have them grafted on whatever, and kind of keep the genetics alive and well, which is what we need at this point. But you know, it's getting pretty grim. Most of the places that are supposed to sell citrus are going to have to convert over to, you know, greenhouses or covered houses in some aspect at some point, which costs millions of dollars, and most people aren't going to be able to do that. So it's going to make it harder on the citrus squeeze. So I'm recommending not to plant any citrus straight out into your backyards right now at this moment in time, unless you're willing to accept the risks of, you know, maybe it, you know, more than likely not surviving for a very long period of time. But if you're willing to like invest in a little bit of a protection house or a screen house or a greenhouse or something like that, you know, we all need a lemon. And it's one of those things where at
Wow.
some point we're gonna get there.
Okay.
Just like I never thought we would get to the point here 8 years ago that we are now. Now it's like, okay, now I'm actually gonna believe that we get to that point by how much you've actually seen. So yeah, protect your carrot. I see you just got the carrot, and
Yeah.
I'm Mr. Trees. We're gonna plant trees. We need the citrus. It's a vital part of everything. But just know that try to treat them more often, keep eyes on them more vigilantly, and really learn as much as you can. See the pictures on the ACP, or have somebody come and kind of show you what's going on. Because just your eyes on it are going to solve and save all kinds of problems.
Wow.
For everybody else in the long term.
I'm wondering, Tyler, can we talk a little bit? I know you're about to talk about pruning, I think.
Yeah. So pruning wise, if you're pruning, so this is the time of year to be pruning your stone fruit or your deciduous type fruit. if your trees have lost their leaves during this winter stay or are mostly leafless, this is the time where you're doing the major pruning and cleaning and taking care of those trees. Peaches, plums, nectarines, cherries, mulberries, figs, the list goes on and on and on. If it loses its leaves, this is kind of the time of year to take care of it. Big tip that I can give you for pruning your trees is they're not all the same. Every tree fruits on a different type of wood or a different aged wood. Example, a peach tree fruits on what grew out last year. So all the stuff that grew out last season, that pink, this stuff right here, you can kind of see this. I don't know if you can see that. It's good, but it's this pink, bubbly little green stuff with all these little bud points on there. Peaches and nectarines should have shot off a bunch of this stuff during the summer months last year. And right now it should look like this, sitting all over the tree. This right here is your magic fruit wood on a peach tree. But on an apple tree or a pear tree, they fruit on spurs, which are these little teeny funky little branches that come off the old wood on the apples and the pears. And they also can fruit on the tips of their newest, youngest branches, which is why if you have a young apple tree or a young pear tree, it'll always put like a cluster of apples on the very tips of all the branches, and it'll bend your branches down and warp them and make them look all, warped and junky. But the idea is they actually want to fruit on spurs, which form on the older wood. And the spur, I wish I had a couple to show you, but it's basically an older branch, and off of that older branch is just a tiny little wrinkly little branch that's coming off of those older, and you'll have 1, 2, 3, and they'll look like little thorns on the old branches of your plum, of your pears and your apples. And that particular spur can fruit year after year after year after year, as long as it doesn't get broken or damaged. It can continually fruit over and over again. The peach and nectarines, as soon as these fruit this year, this is useless. This wood is completely useless for the next following year. So when you're pruning your trees, it's really important to kind of know what you're pruning and where does it fruit. And if you don't know, then just watch it this season and figure out where the fruit forms on your tree, and then really look at it and investigate. Okay, it looks like this, and this is my fruiting wood, because it's a very specific place that the trees will actually want to put on their fruit. Citrus fruit on new growth, persimmons fruit on brand new growth. So the brand new stuff that pushes out, persimmons will fruit on. Figs also, you can cut a fig down to the ground almost, and anything new that shoots up will have fruit on it in most cases, because it fruits on that new growth as well. There are some varieties that can fruit on that last little section of old growth too, but those are less common these days than they once were. It's just, that is the most important thing. So if you learn where your fruit is born on your tree, you can pretty much break any rule that you want after that, because you're not going to ruin your productivity, right? So with a peach tree, you're going to do peach and nectarine. Every single one of these little bud points is going to be a peach or a nectarine, which, you know how big they get. It can't happen. You can't let that every branch have a whole cluster of peaches running down them. Otherwise, they're all going to be small, or you're going to tear the branches out of your tree or what have you. So you're going to remove a good 50% of all that old stuff that fruited last year, the broken branches, all this stuff. When you prune stone fruit or these deciduous type guys, the idea is kind of like a rose, in a sense, where you want a good, few branches that are all occupying their own place in the tree. You got one structure branch coming off, occupying right here. You got another structure branch coming off, occupying here. And then off of your structure branch, you have nothing but fruit wood. So if it's not structure and it's not fruiting wood, it's pretty much a waste of time in a lot of cases when it comes to peaches and nectarines and plums and stuff like that. So you're going to do a fair amount of removal, sometimes 50, 60% of the tree, sometimes it's 30% of the tree, depending on how old and how much vigor you got. But in a growing season, these peaches and nectarines should grow 4 to 6 feet in all directions. So every year you're going to be bringing that puppy back down to earth. A citrus or a cherimoya, or a couple of those other things, those evergreen type trees, you don't prune them the same way. And if you go online and you ask a lot of people, or you look at some videos, they'll always kind of like, everybody groups these trees all the same. You know, you clean out the center, you open it up, you do all this stuff. If you did that to a citrus or a cherimoya, you will get severe sunburn on all the branches. You'll lack of pollination. You'll end up hurting your crop on a cherimoya. Citrus, the best way to think about it is like a citrus or a cherimoya in particular. You should be able to walk around the tree and see air and light moving through the tree, but not be able to make out what's on the other side. Like you should be able to see, you know, your car clear as day through the tree. It should be fairly dense with shade and dappled light covering the branches and stuff. The evergreen trees don't grow nearly as fast. They don't grow nearly as much. They're growing all year round in a very smaller amount. So they don't need as much of that removal. They also don't lose their leaves in the wintertime, which means their bark isn't supposed to be exposed to the sun as much. So that's why you'll go into Arizona, or if you're ever driving through like, you know, a hotter desert, Palm Springs or whatnot, and you see all the citrus trees and they got the white paint on the trunk. That's got nothing to do with bugs. That's just sunscreen. That is straight up sunscreen to reflect the light off of those exposed branches, because they are prone to getting sunburned. So you really want to keep them more on the thick, dense side within reason. You know what I mean? It can't be so thick that you got just horrible infestations in there, but you clean out the dead wood and you get it to a point where you can't really see clearly through it all really, really easy, but you know that there's air and light moving through there. And if you do that, your production value and your health is going to just skyrocket. You're going to eliminate a lot of those problems that a lot of people have. And I go lots of places and the citrus was just opened up in the middle. It's totally open. And then the tops of all of the branches that are in there are just peeled up and black and burnt and just peeling. And they don't heal the same way we do. So, you know, avocados, mangoes, citrus, cherimoyas, most of those evergreens, you can kind of lump into that group where you're not going to prune them as hard. You're not going to be as brutal. You're not going to clean them out and thin them out as much. The peaches, the plums, the nectarines, they got to get through their job through that year really quick, within a few months, and they're putting on a ton of growth. They're also designed to kind of go leafless, and that bark is more protective to those sun rays and such. But pruning for the dormant trees starts about Christmas and ends about the first week or so of March. You can go a little bit, you know, on either side of that. You know, you're not going to hurt a thing. The tree can be leafing out or flowering out. You can still do the pruning if you missed a little bit of time. But your citrus, it's really important to try to prune your citrus like March to May, somewhere in that period of time, instead of pruning it now, instead of pruning it in the heat of the summer, because by pruning it in the heat of the summer and now in other periods of time, you stimulate the growth when the bugs are most prevalent, and those Asian citrus psyllid are just going to go after that new growth. And if you're stimulating your tree when they're really abundant, and you're causing a ruckus. Plus, right now they should be finished in their production cycle, so you kind of let them finish what they're doing. They're giving their fruit. They're tired. They're working hard. And then as soon as your citrus crop is pretty much done, and we're entering into that March and April area, you can kind of clean up those broken branches and give it an overall look, make them look nice and sharp for spring. And then come June, when those leaf miner and all the other insects start showing up, just do not do your pruning. Don't cut off all those shoots with the leaf miner that are damaging. They look ugly. Don't cut them off. You're just going to stimulate more sites for them to attack. Also, you're cutting off your fruit wood for your citrus, because it grows on that new growth that's coming out of there, and you're going to start slowing down your productivity. So during June, I like to recommend hanging some citrus leaf miner traps out in the orchard. They're not going to like solve a problem, and they're not going to kill all the leaf miner that are there, but they're going to capture a good amount of the males, and you're going to knock down the population a good 30-40%, maybe more in some cases. So it's this little red sticky box, and it's got pheromones in it, and you hang it up in the tree, and it attracts all the male leaf miner, and they fly into that box. They get stuck in there and they die. Dead males can't mate, and you have less babies around. So you hang the traps in June, and then come August, you kind of freshen them up. You can hang a new one out in August because they'll go bad because they're pheromones and they'll get full. And then after that, you kind of just turn a blind eye. And then come March, April, that's when you start going and cutting and cleaning and fixing all those things, because the leaf miner are gone for the year. Their production is finishing or done. And it's time for their little reset at that
Sorry,
point.
where did you say you can get those? Did you say?
You can get, so you can get the traps. I would like Walter Anderson Nursery is one of the better places to get them, because they'll be the freshest. If you order them online, you run the risk of, because they're pheromones, they could be old, expired. They could be sitting in the sun, or tired. They're not as effective. Yeah. So it's really important that I wouldn't buy them in bulk either. I wouldn't go in June and buy June and August, because they go bad over a period of time, right? So I would buy a fresh one in June, and then I'd buy another fresh one in August, and then you're kind of guaranteed, the best quality at that point. But Home Depot, Green Thumb Nursery, Grand Jettos, a few of those will carry a version of the leaf miner traps, and it definitely, like I said, it's not going to solve your problem, but it's going to keep the populations down, and you're going to be able to kind of keep it, from being as ugly as it was, so you can kind of get through the summer. But it's hard to turn that blind eye.
About pomegranates, what group do they fit in with about pruning and care?
So they're the deciduous trees. They're pruning right now. Okay. They should be dormant. They should have finished their production. Pomegranates are really cool because they're done from cuttings. They're not grafted trees, and they'll just shoot up, throw suckers out of the ground like crazy. And my best advice for anyone growing a pomegranate tree is try to keep it more of a single trunk, or at least a double trunk. Don't let it be this really nasty big bush like it wants to be, because it's way too sharp. It's way too miserable. It's a nightmare to touch and play with. And it'll just choke itself out. So if you can kind of just cut your losses and look at this little bush with all these little things coming out of there, and just pick out the straightest, nicest trunk there in the middle with the most of a head on there, and I would literally just cut out everything else, and then all of a sudden you groom that as a single trunk tree, and you can keep those things nice and thin, and you'll eliminate losing a lot more blood that way. That's for sure.
A question, if for people who don't have a large yard or planting areas, what about fruit trees in pots? What kind of care
So, kind of like a fish in a fish tank, right? It'll only grow to the size of the environment that it's in, and it's going to shorten its lifespan and health, right? Trees really shouldn't be grown in pots. It can be done for a short period of time. You can do it. You can stuff one in a pot. I've seen them in there for 40 years, different trees here and there, but they're never the best looking tree. It doesn't matter how you slice it. Trees are perennial. They need the relationships of the soil, and that's really what my passion is the regenerative culture and the soil communication, and being able to pull those minerals that are on the back of your vitamin bottle directly from the dirt and put it into the fruit. The only way it can do that is with the relationships in the soil. And a tree, just like the forest, needs to plug into the fungi, needs to have those ask and take relationships that you just cannot get in a pot. It's kind of isolated and cut off from the world, loses communication with its other buddies, and it slows it down. As a temporary thing, you can keep any tree in a pot. Make sure it doesn't get, over root bound. And if you don't want it to jump into the ground, make sure you're keeping stuff underneath it, like a brick or something, so it doesn't root into the ground where it sits, and then you can't move it there anyway, which happens.
Yeah, I have a little fig my fig is stuck in the ground now.
Exactly. Yeah. So picking it up so it doesn't have as easy of a time jumping in the ground is always good. But the sooner the better. For planting it in the ground, your quality is going to be up, your sweetness, your health, your everything goes up. And you don't really need a huge area to grow these trees. Most people think you need this big spot. As long as you're willing to take care of the tree, most things can be kept pretty honed and in line. As long as, I said, where it fruits, you can kind of break all the other rules. That way you're leaving its fruit when it's doing what it's supposed to. There are like the miniature trees, the true miniatures, like the peach, the bonanzas, and the southern bells, or the neck disease, or any of those genetic dwarf trees, or citrus on flying dragon rootstock, stuff that's really small anyway, you can get away with putting those in pots for a lot longer, with less of the issue. But you're always going to have that problem where it's cut off from where it needs to be. He's not plugged in to the soil situation, which those long-term things need. Vegetables, cutesy flowers, stuff that's supposed to live and die really quick. That's the stuff you need to be growing in pots, so that you can kind of they don't care about those relationships as much, and it'll just be better in the long term. But that being said, I had 40 trees in pots and 15-gallon buckets in my little 1-bedroom apartment, waiting for my place that I could plant them one day. And it was my mobile orchard. I moved them around with me everywhere I went until I found a place where I could put them in the ground. But I finally found a place to put them in the ground, and that was the best thing that I could have ever done for them. So can be done. Yeah. Should be discouraged unless it's just a short time thing. But find a little slot you can plug them into if you got anything.
How about do you grow a lot of berries? How about berry vines? Are they?
Yeah.
What's their life cycle? How do you prune them and take care of them?
So the berries, like, blackberries, boysenberries, raspberries, longberries, youngberries, all that stuff, they're all cane type berries, and those are pruned right about now. So they should be looking pretty junky and crappy, and those get pruned down right about now if you need to. The blackberries and the boysenberries and stuff, you don't really have to do much pruning maintenance to make sure they're going to produce. They're wild animals. They're going to root everywhere. They're going to throw up stuff, and kind of the more you leave them alone, the more productive they can be, as long as they're not choking out themselves. But really what you're looking for are those new canes that are coming off those berries. Those new little budded canes are coming off of there. You can kind of remove a lot of that old stuff out of there and kind of keep some of them new canes, kind of like grapes. You kind of cut them all the way back to those new little cane points, and then those will blow up and shoot all over the place. But your blackberries, your caneberries, all those things, you prune those now. Blueberries should be kept in a pot, and in this area they do a lot better in like a pot or a wine barrel. You can really do well if you put them in a wine barrel and get them all really nice and groomed well. But those you can prune now too as well. And blueberries is pretty much just taking that dead wood out and shaping them accordingly. They produce on those new growth that comes out. So you can be pretty brutal with them. They're still going to produce some blueberries with them, but they do a lot better in pots. It's
okay. We have a couple things here. Keeping other than nets on the trees, how do you keep birds and squirrels out from your fruit?
Yep.
And then then you'll have one here on grapevines and avocado trees. So those are the next topics.
Okay. So one of my favorite things to use, hands down, is mosquito netting. Mosquito netting. I'll get that blueberry question too for you. The mosquito netting is one of my favorite things. You can order it from Amazon, Joann Fabrics, different fabric stores or stuff like that will have it. But actual mosquito netting is killer. It keeps out all the little insects, all the little critters, all the stuff. Still allows the light. It's white. Still allows the air, and then you get rid of that whole bird netting thing where your tree grows into the nets and warps your branches, and because you can't get it off right, you're damaging your tree trying to get that stuff on and off. So 2 things: A, try to get some PVC pipe or big tall wood stakes, something like that that's taller than your tree or berry or whatever. Get a couple of them, and then get a roll of mosquito netting and throw it over the top of that, so it's not sitting directly on your plant. Number one, you want to get it up off of your plants, off of your trees if you can, by getting a big PVC pole or something that's just a little taller than your tree. And you drape the net over the top of that, and then you can kind of secure that by rocks on the ground, tying it to the trunk, a million different ways to secure that puppy down really well. You keep the squirrels and stuff kind of slowed down. I mean, some of that stuff, depending on where you are, if you know the battle of squirrels like I do, they can be smart, but pinning it down really well, burying it I do a lot of the time too, which really works well, burying that end down so that it just keeps everything nice and tight and tidy and ready to go. Mosquito netting can be reused. You can put it over vegetable houses. I use it on all over my vegetable boxes for like the lettuces and all kinds of stuff, blueberries. I mean, you name it. Mosquito netting is the way to go. I hate using that bird netting. You can never use it again, really, and it always just messes everything up. So, and it's not effective. And most of the time, you just set it on the top of the tree, and you just create a little table for the bird or whatever to just sit on that net right on the tree and just peck at your fruit right there, right up on it. So try to get it up and away from the tree by putting a couple of posts under there. But mosquito netting, it's really cool, hard to find, really good thing to use. Then the other question was, what was the other question?
How do you prune grapevines?
Oh, grapevines. Okay. Yeah. And avocados. That's right.
And avocados, yeah.
Avocados you want to do it. Yeah. Avocados you want to do in the summertime. So you're doing stone fruit and deciduous stuff, December to March. You're doing citrus and cherimoyas and a couple of those relatives, March to May. And then about May to August, you can do the avocados and the mangoes and all those tropical type plants. So, you know, I like doing those when the weather is warmer, at least starting in May or June for your avocados to really start pruning them. You prune them then because that's when they're going to be flushing a lot more new growth too after their initial flower set. They're flushing now, but then they're going to flush again this summer after they've, you know, got everything set up. So whatever you prune out of those, it will be replaced pretty quickly by new growth if the tree is healthy. And avocados is kind of an only prune if necessary type thing. They have this like green supple bark that's very prone to getting infection. It's not hardened over and just kind of gets picked on, from sunburn to infection to all different types of things. So you really want to keep your avocados thicker, really dense, really nasty little umbrella type plants so that you're shading that ground underneath, because they really are surface rooted and need that. And then you're really just removing the dead wood and any branches that are going to kind of be a potential risk at like tearing out or is going the wrong way or whatnot. Every couple years, you should be able to kind of touch up your avocado if you need to. You don't have to do that every year. Grapes, you beat the crap out of them every season if you're trying to go for production. So they'll grow 20 feet in all directions. You know, this year, you bring them all the way back to that main cane, that main stem point, and off of that main stem point, there'll be those new canes that'll be shooting off of there. And depending on the grape, it can be wine grapes or, you know, table grapes, what have you. There are certain extra benefits, like pruning it down to 2 bud spurs or 4 bud spurs. But just to make it easy for everybody and not knowing what you have or not making it more confusing, it's like you prune it back to the newest canes, and you take the newest canes and you cut them back to where it's got, you know, 5 or 6 buds on that cane, and you'll usually be pretty darn good. It'll shoot off, do its business, and grow that 20-foot, you know, throughout that season just fine. If you leave all that old stuff out there, then that old stuff usually will choke out that new stuff, and your productivity kind of goes down a little bit. If you're really going for productivity, you really want to increase the livelihood of your newer canes coming off of as close to the main trunk as you can. Get it back as close to that main trunk as you can, so it can kind of throw out of there, you know.
Okay. We have a couple questions on blueberries.
Okay. I know. Yeah, I saw the one that said, why keep it in the pot versus the ground?
Versus the ground, yeah. And then, yeah, and right now, another one about they're losing their leaves, and do you pinch them now, or when? Yeah. What do you do with them?
Yeah, so you do that. You do the pinching and the pruning and stuff right now while they're looking junky, right before they're getting ready to wake up. That's totally good. Dead wood, clean them up, you're good to go. The reason why right around here they do better in pots is because here our water is really poor. We're not as acidic as they would prefer. It's hard to keep our soil in our situation more on the acidic side in most cases, not everywhere, because there are some people that are really in tune and you can kind of acidify anything, but they do better up in like a barrel, something that breathes well, like a wood pot. I prefer wood or plastic that has a lot of holes in there and actually a lot of good breath. I don't like the ceramic type pots that are going to hold on to the cold and other stuff like that. They prefer that breath, and like a wood type pot is where I've always seen them do the best in wine barrels, you know, over the years. But you can control that soil a little bit more to push it towards the acidic side a little bit more. And you can get them to kind of groom up. And if you really want, what I do is I have blueberries in wine barrels sitting directly on the ground, so that over that period of time, they do eventually root into the ground there. You know, we don't put anything underneath them so that they will root into the ground, so that initially we can keep them more on that happy acidic type side. And that really helps them get rolling and going. And then when they get a little bit older, they can plug in, and then you're usually solid and good to go. But it's basically just because of the acidity, the breath, the amount of oxygen and stuff that's in the soil. Most of us have really heavy clay soils, and blueberries do, like in the Pacific Northwest and other places like that, where the soil is just different and more rich and aerated. Here we have a little bit of a harder time, not impossible, but if you really want to have success, you put them in the barrels and then you use the mosquito netting, and you're in the game. You know, you're blueberried out, no problem.
Couple of more citrus questions. Fertilizing and water. I guess
Sure.
basically, yeah, that would cover their questions.
Yeah, so like water is easy. If you think about it, like a real farmer, when we used to walk our fields, you know, you walk the field in the farm, and every few feet you bend down and you scratch into the first couple inches of the soil, and you squeeze a handful of the soil. And soil scientists, they call that field capacity test. And basically it's, can you make a clump? Can you make a clump with the soil that holds, that you can kind of move around in your hand, right? So if you walk into your garden and you scratch into the soil, the first couple inches of the soil, and you squeeze it into a ball, if water pours out of there, there's too much water there. If it falls apart when you open your hand and just falls apart like sand, not enough water. But if it holds together in a clump and you can move that clump around in your hand, there's the appropriate amount of moisture and air in that little clump for plant growth. And if you can just get to, I can make a clump everywhere that I'm farming, you're farming, you're in the game. But if you're walking around your tree and one side of your tree, you're making a clump, but on the other side of your tree, it's dry, or it's not the same moisture level as it is on the other side, evenness is really the most important thing. So an even drink of water, just like when Mother Nature rains, she rains where the plants are and where the plants are not, because she's not watering the plants, she's watering the entire situation. And it's plants as individuals, we're not watering the plants. We're if we care for the ecosystem where they live, the plants fall right in line. So water the entire soil system that all of your plants are occupying like it's one living thing. And all of your plants will have no choice but to plug in, communicate with each other, start cycling just like the forest, right? When we isolate our plants and we put a little dripper to this one and a little dripper to this one, and then it's dead and dry in between those two trees, they no longer have any communication. The soil temperature, the soil moisture level, the soil life levels are all different, inch to inch, foot to foot. And that is the recipe for having problems. And that's what we most of the time are dealing with as humans, because we're not understanding that the key to growing things is the forest floor. The ground needs to be covered, and it needs to be the same temperature and same moisture level, inch to inch, foot to foot. And if you go to any place, you know, on earth where plants are growing and we're not taking care of them, you'll find that same thing. You'll always see a layer of debris on the top of dead plants, bark chips, mulch, sticks, twigs, insulating the soil. And underneath that soil will always be making a clump. You'll be making a clump if those trees are growing healthy or not, you know, in most cases. So water is, it depends on your situation. If you're on a hill, if you're, down low, up high, hard soil, sandy soil, it varies. But the easiest thing to do is, can you make a clump where you're farming? And if you can do a field capacity test and you're passing that test, boom, you're already better than you are, the other way around. So watering should be once, twice a week, 3 times a week some places, but really once a week is usually pretty good if you've got a good layer of mulch cover on top of the soils, kind of like a sweatshirt over our skin, protecting it. It will start, encouraging the worm life to come up, because there's no access to the UV exposure to the soil surface, because it's got like bark chips and leaves and stuff on the surface. So worm activity comes back up and starts working. So you get all your nematodes, your protozoas, all that side of the food web. And then also by being covered with plant material like bark chips or leaves, the fungi can now kind of come in and plug in and start doing their thing. And that's how you're going to get the minerals and the richness from the soil. The iron, the zincs, the manganese, the heavier, harder things is from that fungi layer. So having clean soil underneath your trees is a no-no, and watering the tree as an individual is a no-no. So water the entire situation, try to be able to make a clump, and do their best to cover it up with some good bark chips and mulch. Mulch is power. That's the king.
Okay. What about fertilizing? It went back. I forget which trees they were, but citrus basically, and that and kumquats, I think, can they be fertilized the same time each year?
Yeah. So your evergreen trees, citrus, avocados, loquats, kumquats, mangoes, whatever, if it's keeping its leaves all year round and it's green, it needs to eat all year round. There's not a time where you really, should not feed it. Every couple months, depending on when you decide to start, and depending on what you use. If you use liquid foods, you're going to have to do that more often, because it's going to be used right away. If you're throwing down like a bag of Grow Power and a couple of, handfuls or a cup of something, then about every 2.5 months or so, you should throw something down for them. Kind of like the water thing. Like, you don't want to treat them as individuals. So there's no such thing as like this. Well, there is, but specific citrus food and rose food and all these things. There are various ratios and differences to that, but we're not feeding the plants. We're feeding the soil, and we're trying to get those microbes and those organisms in the soil to break down what we're putting down there. And then they break it down to plant available and store it in the soil and stock it up in the soil like a refrigerator. And then when the plant needs something like zinc or manganese or whatever, it asks for it through the network, and they trade. He trades his exudates, his sugars, and they trade the food for what it is. So having a variety of stuff that you put down, like nobody wants to eat cornflakes every day, right? Having a variety of stuff putting down every few months, you're going to be able to make sure that diversity and a good amount of everything is accumulating in your soil over time, as long as you're nurturing the life by watering the whole soil like one thing, having it covered. All of a sudden, those workers are going to go to work for you, and they're going to start storing it like a refrigerator. So feeding, I don't like really heavy pelletized stuff that's like funny colored. If it's like blue and pink or orange or whatever, and they're like these funny little pellets, I try to stay away from all that stuff. I like things that are more like a dirt-like consistency that I throw down and I get wet, and it kind of turns into a tea and goes away. You know what I mean? Grow Power is good. Most organic fertilizers, Dr. Earth, EB Stone, there's a variety of them. But the idea that I like to look for is on like a Dr. Earth fertilizer or a EB Stone all-purpose fertilizer. It'll be made of kelp and bone and fish, stuff that you can kind of pronounce. It's not weird, crazy words. You can pronounce what's in there. And then they'll also usually have a side section with organisms, and they add some beneficial organisms. Sometimes those fertilizers will actually have some fungi, colonies and some bacterial colonies that are beneficial for your soil. So by using a fertilizer like that, kind of caring for the trees like I'm talking about, then you're inoculating your land even more so with the good guys that you need in the soil to break down the stuff. So using those, doctors and EB Stones is a good thing. Grow Power, I really do like. It's a good humic acid fertilizer that really works well. Anything fish, anything kelp, but kind of bouncing it around a little bit. And one time you buy a bag of the all-purpose, fertilizers. The next time you buy the citrus. The next time you buy the flower or the vegetable, and you just kind of jump around a little bit, unless you're trying to do something specific, like before when they're saying my fruit tree is not producing, if something is not doing something, if it's not growing or it's not producing, then we can give it a food that's more rich in something like phosphorus, which will help it bloom more. So we can be a little bit more tailored to what we give it to encourage what we kind of want to happen. But in general, every couple months, feed it something, that's, more on the natural state, that's more of a dirt-like consistency or a liquid, and try to stay away from those pelletized, funny colored chemical fertilizers, because those, those will disable the relationships and, kill some microbes and kind of, make you have to buy things over and over again. That's
a couple real quick things what someone missed, when the best time to prune their orange tree, and mosquito netting, is that going to hinder the pollination?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so your pruning orange tree happens March to May.
Okay.
Anytime March to May, that's when you want to prune them.
Okay.
Well, as soon as they're done with their main crop. So like Satsuma tangerines, they're finishing up right now. You could start pruning those the first of March. Those are one of the first ones to get pruned because they're going to be done earlier. But like a gold nugget tangerine, it's not putting on its fruit and finishing until March. So that one you probably prune closer to May when it was done doing its production, cycle. But if you had to go early, you could go early. But I like to wait until after they're done fruiting in that March to May window for citrus is like a great time to prune.
Okay.
As well as pollination. Yeah. If you put mosquito netting over a plant before the flowers or the fruit has set, yeah, you're going to screw up your pollination. You're going to stop the bees and the bugs from visiting those flowers. So you only deploy mosquito netting after you're trying to protect the fruit. So if you've got, a peach tree or whatever, or, and it's got little nickel size peaches that have set on the tree, the next week or so, you should start thinking about, netting that tree up, but you don't do it beforehand. You don't want to leave the nets up all the time so that you'll screw up the pollination. You want to deploy them to protect the fruit, when you can. So wait for the fruit to be set before you put the netting up.
Okay. And
don't wait too
long.
long.
Watering the whole ground, does it hurt to water the trunks of trees?
You don't want to focus water on the trunks of the trees. You don't want to have water that's, spraying the tree really hard, like from a spray or something, like a water torture type situation. You don't want to hitting the trunk really hard in the same place. That would be bad. You don't want to focus the water on the main root crown or the trunk of the tree. That would rot control center. But water can touch the trunk of the tree. I mean, it does in nature. It can absolutely happen. It's not the end of the world. It's designed to take that water. It's just we as people usually put those emitters so close to the trunk of the tree when it's really young that we don't expect the tree to grow as much as it does, and it ends up just watering right there at the trunk, and it ends up just always being wet right at this point because roots can only drink out of the ends of their system. So like roots come out, the ends of the roots are the only thing that can kind of eat and drink. So there's not very many ends of the roots right by the trunk of the tree of an old tree. All the ends of the roots are out there underneath the canopy in the drip zone, the drip line. So when you water, you want to water from trunk to drip line, trunk to beyond the drip line, right there. It can touch the trunk, but you don't want to focus it there. You want to make sure you're focusing it under the drip line area and just beyond, so that it knows it has some buffer zone and that protection, and it will start, forming those relationships.
Okay.
Never hard sprays on the trunk and never focused water on the trunk, but it can get wet. It shouldn't go dry.
Okay. Two other questions. I think we missed one earlier. Growing bananas in Southern California. Any good choices for that? And then what about, do olive trees need feeding?
Oh yeah. So bananas, they're weeds. They're awesome. Trick with bananas, we can grow 50 different varieties, right offhand that I can name they're killer. The ones that are in the store are called Cavendish, dwarf Cavendish. You can buy those at nurseries. There's ice cream bananas, there's fingerling bananas, there's Thai dwarf bananas, there's Manzilla banana, there's all kinds of them. The difference in bananas is going to be the size of the plant. Some are going to be 5 foot like the Cavendish. They're going to grow 5 foot tall. set a nice big, grocery store clump of bananas, the ice cream is going to be double that. It's going to be 12 feet tall, 15 feet tall, and it's going to set its bananas like that. And it's so on. Some can be 8, some can be 30 feet tall. It just depends on the variety will determine the actual size of the banana. A banana plant, when you grow bananas, number one, it should be more in the shade or a bright area, not a lot of direct sun, especially if you're inland or someplace where it's really hot. You can grow it in the hottest places, but just put it in the shade next to the house or next to a fence, some sort of a shelter so it's not beat up by wind and it has that kind of, protection and more of a shade or a bright area. They'll grow like gangbusters there. They have those big leaves. They're designed to be more in the shade and suck up that light. If you put them in the sun, they'll be more yellow. Their leaves will taco down. They'll be a little bit more unhappy looking. They'll still grow, in some cases and do okay, but they just won't be as beautiful and robust if they're in full sun. So more morning sun or, in the shade is totally cool. And picking the variety that is actually going to suit your height needs is a really big deal. But also know that as soon as a banana fruits, a banana tree will grow up. It'll send up 2 pups or 3 pups underneath of it. And as soon as that big banana tree fruits and sets its cluster of fruit and you harvest that big bunch of bananas, that whole tree dies. Oh. So instead of just harvesting the bananas, you cut down the entire banana tree that those bananas came off of. And then those little pups, those are the grandmother, mother, daughter that replaces it and comes up. So bananas are pupping plants and they can only fruit once. They're very mathematical. They grow up, they fruit. Once they're done fruiting, they're going to die. And if you just cut the bananas off and leave that tree standing tall, like it'll stand that way for a few months, but it will slowly start to rot and turn into this mush that you won't be able to get out of there. And it gets really gross and really nasty. And then it takes up the light from the youngsters and all that other stuff. So as soon as you harvest those bananas off that main clump, cut that whole banana tree down to allow its babies to take over. And usually those babies are already ready to go by then. They're already half the size or most of the size ready to go. But you harvest them afterwards and then put them in the shade. You don't have to do much pruning other than cutting the dead leaves off. But just knowing how tall the variety you're going to get is important. Put them in the shade, and then also knowing that you got to cut them down after they fruit so that the new ones will come. And if you put a banana someplace, don't expect to get rid of it because it's going to pup out. That whole area is going to be bananas. You're not going to plant it one place and have it be there. That same banana won't be in that same place 20 years from now. It's going to be next to it and around it and all that because it's going to move over time. So that's the banana situation.
Feeding olive trees.
Feeding olive trees. We all got to eat. We're all made of the same stuff. We all got to eat. So the same thing I was talking about with the with the regular feeding, it's an evergreen tree. So every 2 or 3 months, it should get something to eat. If you're using a powder or a granular type food or something like that, every 2 or 3 months, you should throw something down for the old olive tree, just to kind of have something to pull on. Olives have around here, the fruit fly is a real problem, and it's a nightmare to try to grow edible olives here. So I don't encourage it at all. We got to be a little bit farther east, or inland and stuff, Ramona, Arizona, like places like that where you start getting hotter and drier because the olive fruit fly is kind of less durable to that climate. It loves it here. So here, fruiting olives, if they fruit, the fruit fly will show up and impregnate all your olives with the little worm. And it's a nightmare. And you have to use the systemic stuff. And it's really hard to deal with. So I discourage the fruiting varieties in the little coastal zones because of that. And they're also prone to transferring disease. I always say it wrong, but it's like a xylella fungus that they get. It's a deadly disease, kind of like the citrus disease, but this one kind of transmits from shear to shear. So they call it olive scorch. You want to look it up. It's called olive scorch. It's like the common name. But the olive leaf itself, half of it will be burnt up, and it'll be really burnt up and look like it's been scorched, so to speak. So, and then big sections of each branch will start to die off and look really crappy. And then some of it will be healthy and okay, but it'll just progressively kind of get worse and die down. It's called olive scorch, and it's a deadly disease. So if you're going to prune your olive trees and you have a couple of olive trees on the property, really important that you squirt them with a little bleach or a little disinfectant or something in between trees, because if one tree is sick, you prune that tree and then you prune that next one because you're getting all your work done in that day, then you just gave all your trees the disease. And not always is it noticeable. It's one of those things that kind of the tree can live with for a little while, and you might not know that it's there, but you can transmit it. And sometimes you're trying to clean those trees up because they're looking really bad because they're sick. And then you clean that one up, and you clean the one next door to it, didn't really have it, and then you just kind of screwed it up. So olives, you feed them every few months, just like everybody else. And when you're pruning them, make sure you kind of sterilize your shears a little bit, and it'll help keep that spread if you've got multiple on the property. But it is what it is, and sometimes the tree people won't be able to do that all the time.
Another one, are two questions. Are coffee grounds beneficial to use? And also, you were saying the drip is not good for garden. Soil is neglected. You need to, what does it say? From the desert, we are trained to put water only at the plant, like you were saying.
So here's the deal. So, yeah. So, if you were to look at it under the microscope, which we do, and or you do any type of real soil science and actually understand that the more alive your soil is, the more water it can hold, the longer things happen, the more water can penetrate, deeper things can happen. All of these things start working in concert with each other, which is how we're not walking around feeding and taking care of the forest floors and stuff like that. So when you water drip for trees, so drip is great for vegetables, for short-lived crops, for things that don't have a real massive root system or need these relationships and networks in the soil. They're going to live really quick and die really quick. It's not a big deal. They're bacterial dominant. Nobody cares. It'll work just fine. They don't have a big massive system. Great. Drip is great. But drip for trees solely by itself is usually going to cause more of a problem, because you're going to have dripping right at the tree itself, and then it's going to be dry over here 6 inches, and it'll be wet over here, and it's going to be dry over here. And those differences affect the life levels in the soil. It means there's no certain worm activity, means that every microbe, everything on this planet is made of water. So those living and dying microbes that are in the soil, billions of bacteria and stuff, they're all holding water and stuff. So the more stuff that's in there, the more water is constantly available. So technically, by covering your soil and making it a living soil, making your soil come alive will actually save you water and effort, because it will use it more efficiently. It'll go farther. It will, all these things start happening because that's how the ball starts rolling down the hill. But when we just throw drip and stuff around those trees and those things as individuals, and the ground is uncovered, then the life levels and everything are all jacked up, and there's not enough of anything. So then there's less water. And then also, by not having a bunch of vitality and things happen in the soil, worms tunneling, stuff like that, all that stuff, then when it rains or when you actually do put water down, it just sits on the surface and evaporates off. But if your soil was alive, it becomes a sponge, and it starts pulling in the rain and starts pulling in those things because it's covered and it's functioning and it's alive. So over time, you'll use half the water that you would by watering it with drip the same way that you do for the rest of your life. You could water it every day the same way or whatever, and your soil would never get any better, and you would never make any changes. And if you implemented taking care of the soil as a whole, all of a sudden, if you were watering twice a week for the first year or two, maybe you're going to once every 10 days at that point. And you can kind of push things back in time because your soil becomes more porous, more alive, more ready to go. So we're taught that we want to conserve water, but you're actually wasting water, and you're wasting nutrition, and you're wasting things by doing it in that manner. And as soon as we went to this water crisis and this drought and everything, and everybody switched over to drip, man, my phone has never stopped ringing because trees started dropping dead like nobody's business. And if you look at any commercial growth, any place where they're growing food for you, you know what I mean? They're watering, they're it's being sprayed out there and put out under the trees, and especially in avocado groves and citrus groves and stuff like that. It's a surface drink of water, sometimes a couple times a day. But the key is cover. Key is mulch, leaves, and then water in, like I said, where the tree is and where the tree is not. And if you have a problem watering where the tree is not, put a plant there. So you're forced to put some water in that little area, you know, and then you'll ultimately start, like I said, you'll stop treating them like individuals and you'll start seeing that benefit. And within a season, I swear to you, if you have good coverage on the ground, you're watering the whole ground like one living thing, you'll scratch that soil, that cover aside, and you'll grab a handful of that soil and it will be more chocolate cake. You will take some of the worst soil you've ever seen in your life and turn it to gold. Where I live here, it was where I planted my 60 tree little plot back there. It was an old skate park that was just dead concrete. I almost killed myself trying to rototill. It was the hardest, nastiest, insane, desolate place on earth. And today I can walk out there 7-8 years later and scratch in the soil and grab handfuls of black soil that is just killer, that is full of worms and all kinds of stuff just from covering it, wow. Keeping it covered. And once you keep it covered, you block UV, worms come back, moisture stays around a lot longer. And then all of a sudden that carbon becomes that food source for those fungi, and things start rolling.
How thick should your mulch be? How much are you talking about? To actually regulate temperature. So now Mr. Gopher, we'll get into that. That's a good one. Yeah. So like mulch to regulate temperature. So the proper soil temperature, if you go to the forest right now or any place that's in the backyard, like an oak grove or whatever, you'll see all the leaves that are on the ground. If you scratch those leaves aside and shoot the ground with a thermometer, one of the thermometers that I walk around with, it'll always be between 60 and 85 degrees. It will never be any lower than that. It will never be any higher than that. If you go into the forest floor, like, and there's snow and patches on the ground, like up in the Humboldt redwoods or whatever, you can scratch aside and shoot that soil and it will be 59, 60 degrees, because that insulation layer at 3 inches deep becomes a buffer. It buffers it from the cold side and it buffers it from the high side. So when plants get above 85 degrees, which will happen, by 10 o'clock in the morning on an uncovered soil in Point Loma in the wintertime, you could go outside on like clean soil and shoot the ground underneath the tree and it'll be 90 something degrees. Wow. And it could be 60 degrees outside, So as soon as that temperature gets above 85 degrees, most plants, not all of them, but most of them stop drinking water efficiently. They slow down. They try to hold on to their water. They start cupping up their leaves, trying to hold on to whatever they have, make themselves smaller to the sun because their soil system is too hot. And right around here, more times than not, our soil system is too hot because we don't have any mulch coverage on the ground. But if you go anywhere on earth where we're not, you never see clean soil. It doesn't exist. It only exists in places where plants don't grow, like the desert or the riverbeds and places like that. Everywhere else, there's leaves, sticks, and twigs covering the ground. And that is the insulator. So you need about 3 inches of depth in order to regulate your temperature in the habitable zone, 60 to 85 degrees in most cases. But just a couple inches, 1 or 2 inches is gonna help you tremendously just by blocking the UV and getting things going. Okay.
But yeah, you need at least that 3-inch mark.
And real quick, back to coffee grounds. Is that good for putting on your soil?
So like throwing coffee grounds in a compost pile or a worm bin or something like that is my favorite way to use them, instead of just putting them directly into the garden. If you're going to put them directly in the garden, it's fine. I wouldn't do it every day. If you drink coffee like me, you'll have tons of coffee grounds. It'll be all coffee grounds out in the back there. So sparingly, because it is going to change the pHs and stuff depending on the varieties and what you're using. Are they brewed? Is it not brewed? There's a bunch of different things that kind of go. So like, every 20th batch of coffee or something, you know what I mean? You might throw some out in the garden here or there. It's not the end of the world. But what I would do is I would just save it up or put it into a compost pile or my worm bin. And I have lots of videos on my YouTube at Mr. Trees. You can go to my YouTube channel, Mr. Trees, and there's how to set up your own easy, quick worm bed. You don't have to do anything like real life. I mean, I got 3 little kids. I mean, it's real life stuff here. It actually works and doesn't kill you and take up all your time and money and stuff like that. But having a little worm bin or something is really cool, and you can give your coffee grounds to that. But all the time, you don't want to do it all the time. Every once in a while, totally cool. Not a bad thing.
Okay, we have about 5 more minutes till it's 8. Last question, what about Mr. Gopher? What about Mr.
Oh,
Gopher?
you cut out.
Oh, pardon?
Okay, so Mr. Gopher. Yeah. Okay. So there's a good video that I put out on my YouTube about gophers and a different way of kind of thinking about them. If you ever look at the pile, so a gopher, if you know you got a gopher, you'll see a big pile of fresh dirt, a mound on the surface of in your garden, in your lawn or under your tree. You'll see this nice fresh pile of dirt on the surface of the soil. And oh man, I got a gopher. He's been digging there, because they always cover up their hole. So they always take the soil and cover it up with that big pile of dirt. But if you ever look at that pile of dirt, it is the perfect consistency for planting things, right? It is the perfect, it's like potting soil. It's shredded, it's beautiful. It's like this, it's all been broken down perfectly. It's like the perfect soil consistency, full of air and life and ready to rock and roll. It's been pulled from down low because heavy minerals like calcium and iron and other things fall in the soil system. So this gopher has been tunneling around there, pulling soil with full minerals that have been falling for years back up to the surface of the soil, breaking down that soil, making it a perfect consistency for plant growth. And also in the process, allowing air and water and all kinds of little points from his holes and stuff that are now injecting into the soil system, right? So moles and gophers are actually Mother Nature's little soil fixers, right? Whenever your soil is very poor and unkept, you're not watering it all like one living thing, and it's not covered and all these other things, weeds are going to grow like crazy because they're the first phase to fix poor soil. And gophers and stuff are going to show up because you need air, you need stuff to happen in your soil. You need to get more water in there. So intuitively, Mother Nature sends these workers straight to your property because your soil is sick. It is not doing well. And in the process, your gopher's here, he's working, he's digging, he's doing his thing. And most of us aren't doing what I was talking about by planting a tree, a bush, a flower, a cover crop, and all these other things. You pretty much just got a tree here and nothing else around it because you're taught to keep everything clean and sterile away from your stuff. So that gopher's been working his butt off all day and he's got nothing to eat. He's got no native plants. He's got no, anything. And your tree is on death's door because those roots are what it is. Some trees like apples and figs are more susceptible because they're easier and it's more supple, full of more water and stuff like that. And the root systems for them to eat, they will eat those. But technically they would prefer to eat like the California poppies and, the little roots of little grasses and all kinds of other stuff that are around there. But if you've got it sterile and you've got it, then he's going to attack your tree. So number one, care for your soil like it's a living thing, cover it up. Once your soil is covered, you're watering the whole thing like it's all alive. The moisture content is the same here as it is 6 feet over there. Eventually, like I said, it becomes more porous, water falls farther, it becomes softer, and you're walking around on your orchard and the ground isn't as stable. It's not as hard and it's giving away. That is the sign for those gophers. Number one, hey, my job is getting close to done. And you'll always see they'll start moving over to a different place because it's not reassuring to have their tunnels be able to collapse so easy. The soil is getting softer. It's things like that. So it's not beneficial to them in that way. So yeah, they're a problem. You might have to lay down the hammer. And I also have a video on my channel on a good way to trap them. There's a black hole trap that you can use, but you always get 2. And I suggest you check out that video because it's pretty cool, and you'll catch them 9 out of 10 times and save yourself a lot of effort. But try to plant more things so there's more food sources. Try not to use. I never use gopher cages. Gopher cages are kind of a bad deal in my opinion. Small holes. Most of the time we put them really close to the tree because it's a young tree and it's just this little small basket. Those roots will eventually grow through those holes in that basket. Roots get big. Those baskets are really small. You start girdling and cutting roots and causing a ruckus underneath the ground. Plus, they rust no matter what, and it's just more trouble than it's worth. Plus, it's usually not wide enough and protective enough to stop that gopher anyway. That gopher really wanted to get up close to that tree and start damaging all those roots coming out of there. He's going to kill your tree anyway. So the idea is trap them when they get too close to the tree. Let them be your workhorse because they're working for you in a strange way. If you can kind of adopt that kind of different mantra, you can let them do some work for you before you kind of push them out or trap them or whatnot. But as soon as they start getting right up underneath my trees and stuff, yeah, it's time to get the hose out or bust out the traps and try to discourage that. But I will push that off longer if I can, in a lot of ways, which is nice because, that's it's just the best way to do it. But the smoke bombs, the poison, you don't want to put poison in the ground. It just sits there 9 times out of 10. They don't eat it, just sits in there and you get poison in the ground. Get yourself a good dog. That's always cool.
My cat will eat them too.
Yeah, you get a rodent prone animal. That's good, man. That's the best way to go about it. But really try to make them work for you, and then lay down the hammer when you can. But the black hole traps are my go-to.
We have one more we missed about where you get good. Do you feel that you can get really good mulch?
There's like San Pasqual Valley soils. It's one of my favorite places. It's not near everybody. Evergreen Nursery, I know that Moon Valley just bought them. So I don't know how much longer or what they're going to do, if they're going to keep it the same or not. But Evergreen Nursery is usually everywhere. There's one down south down there by y'all, and several other places. They have good mulch.
City Farmers is mentioned here.
City Farmers is good. Yeah. Rest in peace, old Bill Tall. That's a cool place. You can get some mulch there. Be careful using the word mulch, because mulch can mean like compost and bark chips like mixed together. It's like a dirt and wood chip mixture. What you really want is bark chips. You want carbon. You want chunky bark chips, and the bigger the chunks, kind of the better you are, because they're going to create more shade on the surface of the soil. They're going to, they're going to take longer to break down. There's more carbon and minerals and all stuff bound up and locked up in there. And it's just kind of better when you get really small, fine pieces of bark chips and stuff. It becomes more like soil, and temperature fluctuates because it's kind of like that. You're not shading the soil anymore. Now you're just putting stuff that's kind of like dirt, small little pieces of stuff that are going to heat up in the same way, so I like bigger chunks of stuff. And you can pretty much buy mulch from anywhere, get mulch from anywhere, as long as you're not getting it from like Home Depot, because 9 out of the 10 bags will have paint on it. So you can get it from Home Depot, but there's only like one bag there out of the 15 or whatever that they offer that is not painted. So, and you kind of got to look for it. Yeah. So it'll say brown mulch or red mulch or natural mulch, or not, but even the natural's got brown paint on it in a lot of cases, right? So if you look at the ingredients on the back of it, it'll say forest products and colorant, and you don't want that. You don't want to be putting paint on the ground. That's not what we're in the game for, right? So if you're going to buy it at Home Depot or Lowe's, look for that, just the natural forest product chunky one. That most of the time there's only, like I said, one choice. But that's the one thing that I would stay away from. And then if you were going to get it from the dump, like in bulk or something, or have a tree guy bring his debris to your house, always kind of keep in mind that the tree guys and stuff, they're probably cutting sick trees. So they got the call, right? Because their tree was sick or it was not looking good or whatever, you know what I mean? So they prune them, they mulch them, and then they got a bunch of, contaminated wood, in there. So all wood is good. But if you're getting it from a tree guy or the dump, I would suggest leaving it to age for a while in the corner of your yard. Like, get it for free or whatever, throw it in the corner and let it sit there for a month or two. Throw some water on it, let it age out a little bit and kill any pathogens, or things like that that are going to sit there,
Right.
which is always good. Bugs, patent, all that stuff, and just let it age. So aged anything will be okay in a lot of cases. You don't want to use eucalyptus, and you
Oh,
don't want to use a bunch of pine needles. So if you can kind of stay away from pine needles and eucalyptus, yeah, you'll probably be okay. And if you're going to get it for free, just kind of think about where it could have come from,
Yeah.
So that's why I like the evergreen or whatever, Moon Valley or whatever they are. And then someplace that are making it, San Pasqual Valley, they're making a nice good quality
Okay.
mulch.
What do you think? What about, someone's mentioning gorilla hair?
Yeah, so gorilla hair, it's good for certain cases, but it's too fine for my tastes, right? So gorilla hair, in addition to some other stuff, like I said before, with food, nobody wants to eat cornflakes every day. So a more of a variety is always best. So a little bit of gorilla hair is fine. A little bit of some small chunks are fine. Some big chunks are fine, but I wouldn't just do straight gorilla hair, because then that becomes, it gets hot and cold much more differently than like a chunky mulch would, and when you have a thermometer and stuff, and you're doing so much temperature measuring and stuff, you really see the differences in what, the particle size and the type and stuff really does on a temperature standpoint. And gorilla hair is better than nothing. Is if you can get something on the cover to cover your soil, that is, go ahead and use it. I would rather have that than nothing. But if you were going to spend money on something, I would get some sort of a chunkier, woodier, hardcore mulch, because of the energy factor. And that goes back to the fungi as well. Is carbon is the currency in the soil. That's all that really matters, is carbon. We need to get the carbon into the soil, back into the soil. That's the currency. That's what those microbes are trading and breaking down and working with, right? So the more locked up in those chunky particles over time, you're putting more carbon back into your soil that way. So gorilla hair is good, but it's not my favorite. And if you're going to use it, I would use that in addition to something else over time.
It is. I just want to bring your attention. It's after 8. If you're, any other questions, I don't want to keep you too long. Oh, someone's asking what the cool chart on the wall behind you is.
Oh, that is the Dave Wilson fruit tree ripening chart. So that goes back to that shows all of the varieties, not all of them, because they're always adding new varieties and stuff, but most of the bulk varieties and when they come ripe on the calendar year. So like I was saying before, it's good to not have all your fruit come ripe in June and July. There's so many other trees that we can plant that are ripened in March and April and May and December and whatnot. So that chart right there kind of maps out the variety and when it comes ripe and kind of how to stagger it and all those types of things. And it's just a cool chart. It's had hung up in here forever. It's a good one. You can go to davewilsonnursery.com and they have all kinds of cool little tidbits and charts and things you can get for free and stuff like that. But that's a cool chart.
Okay. Great. This has been so very, very educational and interesting. We really appreciate it. I think everyone's really enjoyed this. Any last questions? I know it's 10 after 8. Don't want to keep you. So, if there's nothing else, then.
Yeah, no, just keep everybody, if you have citrus, just do us all a favor and just kind of learn a little bit about the ACP, because that's our biggest problem. And there's not very many things out there that we can't fix in the tree world that are going to cause us all problems, So just take a look at that. And, if you have any questions, you guys can look me up, check out my YouTube. It's Mr. Trees. There's always some funky stuff on, going up there. UCSD usually does some cool videos for me and they do other stuff. So it's nice. There's random things that come up all the time. So, but if you need something or you got a question about just send me an email or whatnot. I'd love to make sure that, more trees are doing well,
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you. I guess.
No, my pleasure.
We'll say good night to everybody. Okay, thanks. Okay.
Thank you guys.
Take care, everyone. Okay, bye-bye.